On that day, there were no flies on the dead, because the flies were dead too. People die of natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes. But this disaster was different. It came and went, taking hundreds of lives, sparing no one in its way. From farm animals to birds, children, old or young alike, who slept in their beds in hope of waking up the next morning, without even thinking of the sad reality, death. But they never woke up from the deep slumber. Nothing moved an inch. No sound was heard. No cries came out. The only thing that remained, the lifeless bodies scattered around. This is a true event, a natural phenomenon that was simply never heard of. But this time, death came from below, from deep under the water. In this episode, I will take you through the heartbreaking journey of grief, questions, and death. A terror that spared the life of only a few. This was the Lake Nyos disaster. On August 21st, 1986, a limnic eruption occurred at Lake Nyos in northwestern Cameroon. A limnic eruption is a rare phenomenon in which dissolved carbon dioxide suddenly erupts from deep lake waters, forming a gas cloud capable of suffocating wildlife, livestock, and humans. It killed around 1,800 people and over 3,500 livestock in a single night. A traveler made his way by bicycle from the remote Cameroon village of Wum towards the neighboring village of Nayos. The dirt track was unusually quiet that day, and when he found an antelope that had clearly died recently, he strapped it to his bike. Soon, he realized that there were dead animals everywhere he looked. He surmised that they had possibly been killed by a lightning strike and journeyed on. When he came to a small settlement, he decided to call in and ask if anyone knew what had happened. On entering the first house, he found that everyone was also dead. He found the same tragic scene in every other house he checked. He panicked, threw his bicycle to the ground, and ran as fast as he could back to Wum. By the time he reached Wum to tell his story, several people from Nayos and neighboring villages had arrived. Some spoke of hearing an explosion, others of smelling a foul odor. Some described passing out for more than a day, only to find the bodies of their friends and family strewn around them when they awoke. On the night of the explosion, Ephraim Che was in his mud brick house on a cliff above Nayos. Around 9 p.m., Che, a subsistence farmer with 4 children, heard a rumbling that sounded like a rock slide. Then, a strange white mist rose from the lake. He told his children that it looked as if the rain were on its way and went to bed feeling ill. Down below near the lake's shore, Halima Sully, a cowherd, and her 4 children had retired for the evening. She also heard the rumbling. It sounded, she would recall, like the shouting of many voices. At first light, Che headed downhill. Nayos, normally crystal blue, had turned a dull red. When he reached the lake's sole outlet, a waterfall cascading down from a low spot on the shore, he found the falls to be uncharacteristically dry. At that moment, he noticed the silence. Even the usual morning chorus of songbirds and insects was absent. He was frightened. His knees were shaking. He ran further along the lake. Then he heard shrieking. It was Sully, who in a frenzy of grief and horror had torn off her clothing. "Ephraim," she cried, "come here. Why are these people lying here? Why won't they move again?" Che tried to look away. Scattered about the lay of the bodies of Sully's children, 31 other members of her family, and their 400 cattle. Sully kept trying to shake her lifeless father awake. On that day, there were no flies on the dead, because the flies were dead too. He continued to run downhill to the village of Lower Nayos. There, nearly every one of the village's 1,000 residents were dead, including his parents, siblings, uncles, and aunts. I was crying, he says. It was August 21st, 1986, the end of the world, or so she believed at that time. Some estimates suggest that around 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide gas was released that night. It rose to about 100 kilometers above the surface, but due to its higher density than air, it descended to neighboring villages. It replaced the air and suffocated people, livestock, and their other animals to death, all within 25 kilometers of the lake. Soon, a delegation of scientists from France and America arrived to investigate the event. The bodies of the dead showed no signs of trauma or struggle. These people had simply died where they were. As the research team approached Lake Nyos, they noted that the bodies became more numerous. When they arrived at the lake, they saw that it was an unusual dark brown color. The fact that the lake was responsible for the deaths was immediately clear to the scientists, but the methodology involved was not. Further research found that carbon dioxide had built up under high pressure in Lake Nyos, which is a volcanic lake. A landslide into the lake may have caused the gas to be released. A volcanic eruption under the lake might also have been the cause. The terrifying scene that is explained by the survivors, who mostly woke up after being unconscious for 12 to even 36 hours, explained the terror that broke onto them. They heard cries from around the village. Someone was crying for their children. Some unable to believe that all of their family members had passed. The villages nearby fled to rescue, help, and recover the dead, and get the living to a treatment facility. Many survivors were treated at the main hospital in Yaoundé, the country's capital. It was believed that many of the victims had been poisoned by a mixture of gases that include hydrogen and sulfur. Poisoning by these gases would lead to burning pains in the eyes and the nose, coughing, and other symptoms similar to being strangled. Interviews with survivors and pathologic studies indicated that victims rapidly lost consciousness and the death was caused by CO2 asphyxiation. At non-lethal levels, CO2 can produce sensory hallucinations, such that many people exposed to CO2 report the odor of sulfuric compounds when none are present. The scale of the disaster led to much study on how a reoccurrence could be prevented. Several researchers proposed the installation of degassing columns from rafts in the middle of the lake. The idea behind these is to slowly vent the CO2 by lifting heavily saturated water from the bottom of the lake through a pipe, initially by using a pump, but only until the release of gas inside the pipe naturally lifts the column of effervescing water, making the process self-sustaining. Starting from 1995, feasibility studies were successfully conducted, and the first permanent degassing tube was installed at Lake Nyos in 2001. 2 additional pipes were installed in 2011. In 2019, it was determined that the degassing had reached an essentially steady state, and that a single one of the installed pipes would be able to self-sustain the degassing process into the future, indefinitely maintaining the CO2 at a safe level without any need for external power. Ever since the incident, many studies have been conducted in the volcanic regions of Africa, but they have all been marked safe. What are your thoughts? Be sure to let me know down below. Because for now, for tonight, I think we have to add the Lake Nyos disaster to our never-ending, but are always growing Tales from the Dark.